You know, one of the things, and one of the things I most enjoy at the foundation is the opportunity to have interesting conversations. But what I love best is smaller conversations, more intimate settings, where we can have authentic, open conversations about things that matter to us. And by us, I mean all of us. And so when I was asked to speak about life in public service, I really had to think more deeply. And it started out with a question, why serve? Why serve? And so if you don't mind, I wanted to begin with a story. It's not about me. It's actually about my father and his best friend. When both of them went to medical school. I'm half Indian, in case you're wondering, from India. I went to medical school in Calcutta. And they came as young doctors to Malaya, which today is Malaysia, Malaya, in colonial times, in the early 1950s. And it was a time when the country was moving towards independence, and it was a time of nation building. And so they entered the public service as young doctors in the area of public health. Both men were, great friends, young, idealistic, very enthusiastic. They were also outsiders. They were immigrants, but they embraced their new country. And as a child growing up, I remember watching my father serve. I didn't understand very much, but what I did understand was he served with great love. And he was part of a movement at that time where he was able to introduce a lot of practices which saved people's lives. Childhood immunization campaigns, public education on dengue fever. He trained a crop of public health workers. So he served faithfully, and he earned trust of people he served. But it was also a career which was very, very challenging. And along the way, there were difficulties. Difficult people, political people, corruption, disappointment, as well as personal setbacks in his career. So as I thought about it, I thought about what are some of the lessons that I would take, which I would want to share in a setting like this. And so here they come. I think that all of you, and to the, first of all, that what you call your chant, your mantra is so powerful. Your note about this is the group we've been waiting for, which we've been praying for, is so apt. All of you, and I just only had an opportunity to speak to some of you, all of you are so fortunate. So fortunate to be beginning your career in public service at a time when your service is so desperately needed, but also at a time when you're coming to this table with the things that we need: intelligence, ideas, passion, an appetite for risk, optimism, a willingness to try new things, curiosity. These are all of the qualities which will stand you in good stead. Now, these alone will help with a good start, but a good start is only not even half the game or half the battle. And if we were to take a look at the long haul, what we really need is steadfastness in service, ethical service. I think part of your chant is integrity. But at the end of the day, it is also high impact service, because that is what citizens and people deserve. Several weeks ago, we had the opportunity to witness a young man, Eliud Kipchoge, do something unbelievable. Unbelievable. What people had thought impossible. He beat his own time. He beat his own time, and he inspired countless of people to push beyond their own limitations. Now, but his whole process is so instructive, because like any good athlete, he trained. He trained, he worked hard, he paced himself, he maintained a steady speed throughout the race. And what was particularly interesting was he calibrated himself for a marathon, not a sprint. I think those of us who choose a life of service have to do the same thing. And living a life of service, as we know, will have its amazing moments, but it will also have its challenge. The journey may have some unforeseen setbacks. They may be personal mistakes, personal miscalculations. And so moving forward requires bouncing back from setbacks, and it means bouncing back at moments from disillusion. I think that's highly possible and something all of us can do if indeed we can answer for ourselves the question, why serve? Frankly, it doesn't matter what the answer is to anyone else, as long as it matters to you, and that the answer is compelling, it's authentic, it feels right, it's an answer that can serve you well in terms of anchoring you, and it serves as a refuge on a tough day. Why do you serve? Think about that. Why do you serve? Why do you serve? We have a MasterCard Foundation scholar here in Ghana. Her name is, and I'll make sure I pronounce the name correct, Angela Nantambi. And she had a very interesting quote which I want to share with you. It is about courage, and it is so apt. She said there are lots of acts that form courage. Waking up on a bad day is an act of courage. Not quitting when facing great challenge is an act of courage. And so when I think about an authentic reason to serve keeps us anchored amidst challenge. That's so critical. That's part of running the long race, part of running this marathon. Now, beyond personal conviction, what else do you think we need? I'd like to offer up a couple thoughts. First, invest in relationships. And there are 3 types of relationships which I found to be powerful, and I hope they might be of service to you. So the first is invest in relationships with people who are a bit more seasoned, who perhaps are traveling the same road, but they're further on down the road, and they've seen the weather and they've seen what's ahead. Invite them, learn from them, ask them to share their mistakes. So you don't have to make those mistakes. You can make your own, but you should make new mistakes. Second, invest in a group who you will call your peers. People who are also traveling the same path, maybe more or less the same speed. Those who will be there to celebrate victories, pick you up when you're down, but people who will keep you true to your beliefs, to your values, to your ambition. And third, and perhaps most importantly, even at this stage in your career, start to think about the people who are following you, who are just coming up behind you, right down the line. Sometimes we forget that we serve as role models, that others look to us for inspiration. We are sometimes so caught up in what we're doing, we forget that. But when you remember that there are others who look to you, they're counting on you, then you know quitting is not an option. It's not an option at all. All 3 sets of relationships are vital. And I feel like I've been personally enriched by mentors who have kept me on the path. Sometimes I've taken a detour and they've helped bring me back. And I thank my mom who got me on the path to begin with, right from the very first day. These relationships matter. And when you think back to Kipchoge's own path, it took a community, many different people, to ensure that his success. What we see, sponsors, trainers, pacemakers, as well, or pace setters. Pacemakers go in your heart. Pace setters, hopefully it doesn't have one of those things. But people who cheer you on. It takes a community to keep you going. It takes people who give us endurance so that we stay and we run the race. And I think the final attribute is probably something you've heard before. People talk about resilience. I like to think about grit, which probably has a little bit more of a granular feeling to it. The challenges that your ministries, which you are now part of, are seeking to address. And leaders who come and who go with election cycles, are also seeking to address are tough ones. Poverty, inequality, issues of justice, stability. These are long, challenging issues. We have to remember that we stand on the shoulders of people who have come before us, who have cleared the path, who've done a lot of work, and they've passed the baton to us. So while we may be running a marathon, we need to think about our marathon as a relay marathon. And we have to maintain a sense of urgency while we are holding that baton, because the issues that we're working on affect human life. And anything this important, anything this meaningful and this profound means that it is also incredibly consequential if we say we're stopping or we're giving up. So as I close, I want to come back to the story I started with. I mentioned my father and his best friend. I want to talk about the best friend. His name was Dr. Biswas. And when my father died, I was around 14 or 15 years old when my father died, Uncle Biswas became like my dad. Now, he was also an idealist, no question, and he stood for excellence in medical service. But unlike my father, he had a very different view and in terms of his makeup and perhaps his mettle. He was also a realist. He found a way to stick to his own code of ethics and at the same time figure out how to work with people, some he didn't even like or respect or always agree with. But what was amazing was at the height of his career, he came to lead the medical service in Malaysia. And so the policies and the practices that he was able to influence, still 35 years later, benefit the country. And I always think about Uncle Biswas, who's passed on now, he was 92, and that we need more people like him, servant leaders, people who were committed to integrity and ethical service, who remained hopeful about the future, sometimes dogmatic about principles, but pragmatic about how to get things done and how to serve his constituents. So I think all of you are at the cusp, just the beginning, of what could be an incredibly rich career in the public service. I hope it will be rewarding. I hope it will be socially impactful. And some of you along the way may take a sidetrack and do something else. But whatever you do, whether you come into government, leave it, come back, I hope that you will be really, really successful. And whatever it is you do, you stick to your values, you remember this chant, you remember the fact that you are the generation we've been praying for and hoping for, and that you lead, and you lead with integrity. And that most importantly, you calibrate for the long race, for the marathon, and at the right moment, you pass the baton on. So thank you for listening to me. I'm open.